abandoned my profession as a say worker the day I discovered that I had slept with my father. I didn't know what was more devastating that day, the fact that I had to face the man who abandoned me, or the cruel realization that he was my client. As soon as he entered the room with that smug smile, my body froze. The world around me spun, as if I were trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The cheap scent of perfume mixed with the worn carpet and the yellowed lamp created the perfect setting for the horror I was about to experience. "You don't look like the shy type," he commented with a muffled laugh as he took off his coat and hung it on the chair. He didn't even glance at me with any attention. I was just another one for him. I forced myself to breathe. My job had prepared me for uncomfortable situations, but that was another level. Sweat trickled down my neck and my mind screamed, unable to process the reality before me. My father was there, just a few meters away, paying for a night with me. His eyes scanned the room, showing no signs of recognition. He didn't know who I was. I could feel the bitter taste of bile rising in my throat as bitter memories flooded my mind. It had been so many years since he had vanished from my life, leaving no trace, not caring about what would happen to me and my mother. He had left a hole in our lives, a hole that had never been filled. "Dad?" My voice came out in a trembling whisper. The sound made him stop mid-motion, as if someone had pulled the emergency brake. He turned slowly, his eyes wide with shock. Finally, he recognized me. His smile vanished, and the confident man from before crumbled in the blink of an eye. He looked dazed, lost. And I, trapped in the chaos of that moment, didn't know what to do. My legs trembled, unable to move. The words I had held back for so many years burned in my throat, but I couldn't let any of them out. He tried to say something, but the silence between us was so thick that no sound seemed capable of breaking through. His face twisted in confusion, and finally, regret. But that didn't matter anymore. He was there, in the same room as me, not as my father, but as a client. "What are you doing here?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse and tense. I didn't respond. What was I doing there? Trying to survive? Making choices he forced me to make when he abandoned me? The words fought to escape, but all I could manage was a look of disgust. Without saying anything else, I ran. I passed by him, opened the door, and fled that room, as if my life depended on it. And in a way, it did. I ran through the streets without looking back. My heart raced uncontrollably, as if it were trying to escape from my chest. The air felt heavy, suffocating me. Each step was a desperate attempt to flee from the reality I had just faced, but it was impossible. Memories surged forth like an avalanche. The lonely childhood, the days I waited for him to come back, and the growing anger that had accumulated over the years. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed onto the filthy sofa, the smell of stale cigarettes and moldy walls enveloping me. It was a small, cramped place, far from what I had dreamed of for my life. But it was all I had. The crushing sound of silence reminded me of what I had just experienced. My father, that man I believed to be dead or far away, was there, paying for a night with me as if I were just anyone. I needed to talk to someone, and only one person could understand the chaos in my head. Clara. Clara was like me, a survivor. She had known me since the days we roamed the streets, trying to scrape together money any way we could. Our friendship was like an anchor. I needed her now more than ever. I grabbed my phone, and the message was already typed out before I even realized it. "I'll meet you at the cafe in 10 minutes. When I walked into the cafe, Clara was already there, her hair disheveled and a lit cigarette between her fingers. The carefree smile she always wore was on her face, but her eyes narrowed when she saw me. "You look terrible, friend," she said, exhaling smoke from the corner of her mouth. She always had a brutal way of being honest, but at that moment, I needed it. I sat down across from her, unable to hide the tremor in my hands. I saw him. My voice faltered. Clara raised an eyebrow, confused. "My father? He was today's client." Those words tore through me as I spoke them aloud. Reality crashed down on me again, like a punch to the stomach. Clara fell silent, the cigarette paused in the air, and the shock on her face was evident. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She knew my past, the scars I carried, the shadow that man had left in my life. How are you dealing with this?" she finally asked, extinguishing the cigarette with a trembling hand. I let out a bitter laugh, more a nervous reflex than a sign of humor. I don't know how I'm dealing. In fact, I'm not dealing. I ran away. I just ran. Clara shook her head thoughtfully, then reached for another cigarette. You did what you had to do. What a messed up situation, friend. She took a drag from the cigarette, her eyes fixed on the table. And now? Do you plan to talk to him again? That was the question I had been trying to avoid. I don't know. He wants to talk to me, I'm sure. But what can he say? Nothing will change what he did. He abandoned me. He left me with my mother, who never cared about anything but herself. How can he explain that? Clara nodded, her gaze becoming distant. I knew what she was thinking. Her father had also been a devastating absence, but in Clara's case, he was dead. At least her absence had an explanation. You don't have to make a decision right now, she said finally. Give yourself some time. You don't need to figure everything out today. But, she paused, looking into my eyes seriously. If you decide to confront him, do it with your head held high. Don't let him have power over you. This guy has already messed up your life once. Don't let him do it again. Those words echoed in my head long after I left the cafe. Clara was right, but what would I do with that? It was an answer I didn't know. The following days were a mix of confusion and restlessness. I tried to live my life normally, but the memory of that grotesque encounter with my father wouldn't leave my mind. I saw him in every unfamiliar face on the street, in every customer that walked in. And, even more, I knew he was nearby. I couldn't shake the feeling that he would show up again, that he would try to reconnect, as if it were possible to fix what had been broken for so long. One night, while sprawled on the couch in my apartment, the persistent sound of the phone startled me. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. My stomach flipped. I knew it was him. I took a deep breath before answering. Hello? Daughter? We need to talk. The voice on the other end was hoarse, as if it carried decades of regret in its words. I stayed silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. What would I say to the man who destroyed my life? Don't call me daughter, I managed to murmur, my voice laced with contempt. You don't have that right. There was silence on the other end. I imagined he was trying to find the right words, but there were no right words to fix what he had done. I know I failed you. I know there's no excuse for what I did. But I couldn't leave it like this. Not after what happened. His voice was fragile, as if he were breaking little by little. And why now? My anger was growing by the second. You disappeared for years. I turned out fine on my own, had to learn to survive without you. And now, out of nowhere, you show up, paying to spend a night with me? What kind of man does that? The line went quiet for a moment. Maybe he was absorbing the impact of those words, but I doubted he truly understood. I didn't know. He sighed deeply. I swear, I didn't know it was you. I was trying to fix my life. God, I know this sounds empty, but it's the truth. When I realized it was you, I can't explain the shame, the horror I felt. I don't care what you felt. You abandoned me. You left me in that hell with my mother, who never cared about me. You have no idea what I went through. My voice rose, and I no longer cared to control the tone. I needed him to hear it, to feel the weight of the pain he caused me. I know that nothing I say can fix the past, but I wanted to try, he said, his voice faltering. Try what? To be a father now? It's too late, I interrupted, unable to control the volume of my voice. The resentment was like poison rising in my chest. There was a long silence. I felt he was trying to find some way out, some way to soften what couldn't be repaired. I won't bother you anymore, he finally said, his voice low, almost defeated. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I just hung up the phone, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. My head throbbed, and the pain of reliving all of this felt stronger than ever. I knew he wouldn't give up that easily, but at that moment, I just wanted to forget. The next day, Clara showed up at my apartment. She brought with her that carefree air that always accompanied her. But I noticed something was different. Her eyes were heavier, her skin paler. You won't believe what happened, she said, throwing herself on the couch next to me. Raul followed me yesterday. I was leaving work, and he showed up, acting casual as if he was worried about me. Raul was Clara's abusive boyfriend, a dangerous man who kept her trapped in a toxic cycle she couldn't escape. He always came back, always found a way to control her. What did he want? I asked, feeling the knot in my throat form. He said he wanted to talk. He apologized for everything, as he always does, saying he would change. But this time, Clara hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. This time, he threatened me. My body went rigid. I already knew what Raul was capable of, but hearing that was a shock. Clara had always been so strong, and seeing her vulnerable like that scared me. He said that if I tried to leave him again, he would come after you. The words came out with difficulty, each carrying the weight of the threat. I fell silent, feeling panic begin to rise. Raul was dangerous. I knew that, Clara knew that, and now he was threatening us. You need to get out of this relationship, Clara. Seriously. It can't go on like this. He's going to ruin you, I said, trying to be firm, but my voice was choked. The truth was, I was scared. Scared for her, scared for myself. I know, Clara replied, quickly wiping away her tears. But it's not that easy. He controls me. He knows how to manipulate me. I don't know how to get out of this. We both knew the situation was becoming unsustainable. And while I was dealing with the ghost of my father, Clara was fighting against the man who was ruining her life. We were on the brink of collapse, and something had to change. In the days that followed, the tension was palpable. Clara was increasingly scared, and so was I. We knew Raul was not joking. He was the type of man who, when he threatened, followed through. And now I found myself torn between the chaos my father had brought back into my life and the real danger Raul posed to both of us. Clara tried to act normally, but I could see how she was crumbling. Her eyes were constantly red, as if she hadn't slept in days. I knew she needed an escape, but above all, she needed the courage to take the first step. One night, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. Her face was marked by bruises, and her swollen lips were proof of the latest conversation with Raul. "Did he do this to you?" I asked, already knowing the answer, but feeling my stomach churn at the sight of her state. She nodded, unable to look me in the eyes. "This time it was worse. He said that if I go to the police, he will come after you. He has no limits, and I don't know what to do, friend. I don't know anymore." I hugged her tightly, feeling my heart squeeze. Raul was going too far, and I couldn't allow her to face this alone. Clara had always been the only person who helped me, who gave me strength when I thought I couldn't go on. Now it was my turn to be strong for her. "You're not staying with him anymore. Tomorrow we're going to the police station, and you're going to file a report. I will go with you. There's no turning back, Clara. This guy is a monster, and he can't keep doing this to you." I tried to sound firm, but the truth was that fear was also eating away at me. Raul was dangerous, and I knew confronting him meant putting our lives at risk. Clara shook her head slowly, her eyes lost. "He's going to kill me. He's going to kill you. I tried to leave before, and he always finds me. He always makes me come back." My mind was spinning. I knew she believed that, but we couldn't continue like this. We couldn't let fear paralyze us. "Let's find a place for you to stay. I know an NGO that helps women in situations like yours. They can protect you, Clara. We just need to take the first step." She looked at me with a mix of hope and despair. "And you? What if he comes after you?" I took a deep breath, trying to control the rising panic. "I will be fine. We will be fine. I won't let this guy ruin our lives." The next morning, I took Clara to the police station. She was nervous, looking over her shoulder the whole time, as if Raul could appear at any moment. I held her hand while we waited in line to file the report. The police weren't exactly welcoming, but we managed to register the case. Clara reported the abuse, the threats, and handed over messages Raul had left on her phone. It was an exhausting process, but necessary. As we left the police station, Clara seemed a little lighter, but the fear was still there. We knew Raul wouldn't give up easily, but at least now we had a little protection. A restraining order was issued against him, and I just hoped it would be enough to keep him away. That night, Clara stayed at my apartment. It wasn't the safest place in the world, but at least she wouldn't be alone. While we watched some random series on TV, trying to distract our minds, my phone rang. Unknown number. I knew who it was. "Do you think you can run away from me?" Raul's voice invaded my ears like poison. "Do you think the police will protect you? Me? I know people. I know where you are. This game is going to end very badly for you and Clara." My body froze. I felt the blood run cold in my veins. I looked at Clara, who immediately realized what was happening, panic written on her face. "Raul, if you come near us, I swear I will make you pay for everything." I tried to sound threatening, but my voice faltered. "We'll see," he replied before hanging up. The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara was sitting, her hands covering her face, her shoulders trembling. I knew we couldn't continue like this. This wasn't living. "Tomorrow, we're going to the NGO," I said, trying to stay calm. "They will help us. We'll get through this." Clara just nodded her head, defeated. The next morning, we did as planned. We went to the NGO, and Clara was welcomed by a team that seemed prepared to handle cases like hers. It was a relief to know that there were people willing to help. They offered protection and shelter for Clara, a safe place where Raul couldn't find her. As Clara had her initial interviews with the NGO's lawyers and psychologists, I sat in a plastic chair in the waiting room, staring at the cold, white walls. I felt a pang of sadness and relief at the same time. I knew I was doing the right thing, but the fear of Raul didn't go away. Hours later, when Clara came out of the meeting room, she seemed a little calmer. There was a plan now. She would stay in a safe shelter, receive psychological support, and, most importantly, be protected. "And you?" she asked, looking at me with concern. "Are you going to be okay?" I wasn't sure how to respond. I knew Raul wouldn't give up easily, but I couldn't let Clara see the fear that still consumed me. "I'll be fine. Now you're safe, and that's the most important thing." I smiled at her, trying to convince her, and myself, that it was true. After dropping Clara off at the NGO, I walked back to my apartment, feeling a mix of relief and anguish. She was safe, finally away from Raul, but now I was the target. His call still echoed in my mind, each word a threat that felt more and more real. I knew he wouldn't let it go easily. To make matters worse, my father was also lurking, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. I arrived at the building, the stained walls and dark hallways giving me a strange sense of claustrophobia. Every sound seemed amplified, the echo of my footsteps, the noise of a faucet dripping somewhere distant. I opened the door to my apartment, and before I could even relax, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was a message. "I'm coming by today. We need to talk." My stomach knotted. It was my father. The man who had abandoned me, and who, in some twisted way, was now insisting on re-entering my life. Part of me wanted to ignore it, pretend he'd exist, but another part, the more vulnerable part, needed to understand, needed to hear him out, even if it meant never seeing him again. I sat on the couch, trying to mentally prepare for what was to come. Time passed slowly, and each minute dragged on. Finally, I heard knocks on the door. My heart raced. I opened the door, and there he was, with an expression that mixed guilt and anxiety. He was no longer the man I remembered. His previously dark hair was now gray at the sides, and there was a deep sadness in his eyes that once exuded nothing but confidence. For a moment, the silence between us was overwhelming. "Can I come in?" he asked, hesitantly. I stepped back, allowing him to enter. The apartment felt even smaller with him inside, as if the weight of the past filled every corner. He stood still, looking around, as if trying to understand the life I had built without him. Finally, he turned to me and began to speak. "I know I have no excuses. I know that nothing I say will erase what I did, but..." He took a deep breath. "I need you to listen to me. That's all. After that, if you want, I'll leave and never come back into your life." I crossed my arms, trying to appear stronger than I felt. "Get on with it." He lowered his head, as if searching for the strength to continue. "When I left you, and your mother, I was lost. I didn't know how to handle anything. Life, responsibilities. I was a coward, and I paid the price." His voice was low but filled with regret. "I spent years running away, hiding from everything. I did a lot of wrong things, and I know I can't go back. But when I saw you in that room, it was like I was struck by lightning. I realized how much I had ruined everything. And I know I'm not the father you deserve. I never was, but I'm trying to be a better person." I laughed, a bitter laugh that echoed off the walls. "Better? You want to be better now? Years after leaving me in that hell? I had to make choices you could never imagine. You have no idea what it's like to live without anyone. Without support. Alone." He blinked, holding back tears. I know I left you alone, and I hate myself for it, but He paused, his gaze hardening. "I'm not going to give up trying to fix this. I need a chance, just one chance to show you that I've changed." I fell silent, emotions swirling inside me like a storm. It was then that. Comment part 2 if you want to know what happens next, and subscribe to the channel to watch when it premieres.